Have you ever seen someone get called out for stolen valor? My husband's family treats military service like a religion, and his older brother Greg is the high priest. I serve too, but I never talked about it. And when my husband introduced me to his family years ago, I just smiled and nodded while Greg dominated every conversation with tales of his heroic service. Explaining myself meant revisiting memories I spent years trying to bury, so I kept quiet and let him have his spotlight. This reunion started the same way, with Greg describing a firefight. Except this time, he stopped mid-sentence and looked directly at me. What did you even do in the military? I just realized I've never heard you talk about it. I said I was a medic. He laughed. Must have been nice, handing out Tylenol while real soldiers did the hard work. I felt my jaw tighten, but I smiled and said it kept me busy. His wife leaned in with a sympathetic look. Did you ever see anything traumatic? Before I could answer, Greg cut in. The most traumatic thing she probably saw was a hangnail. His parents laughed. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, and I squeezed back. I could survive one more reunion for his sake. Greg launched into another story about a mission where his unit took heavy fire for 3 hours straight. He described the sounds of the bullets, smell of the smoke, the look in his buddy's eyes when they finally got the all clear. The whole time he kept glancing at me, like he was making sure I understood what real service looked like. When he finished, his dad clapped him on the shoulder and said he was proud of him. Greg looked right at me. That's what it's like when you actually leave the base. But I'm sure the air conditioning was nice. His mom laughed. You should be grateful you had it easy, sweetie. Not everyone's cut out for the real thing. I felt something hot building in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. My husband's leg was bouncing under the table. He knew I was close to my limit. Greg took a long sip of his beer, and then said the thing that broke me. You know what? I can't stand people who play soldier and call it service. Where I come from, we call that stolen valor. My husband stood up. Shut your mouth, Greg. You have no idea what you're talking about. The table went quiet. Greg leaned back and smiled. It's cute that you want to defend your little medic wife, but maybe you should ask her why she never talks about her service before you embarrass yourself. He looked at me and shook his head slowly. Women like you love to play veteran until someone asks for actual details. My fingernails were digging into my palms so hard I thought I might draw blood. My husband started to respond, but I stood up and put my hand on his shoulder. I didn't say anything. I just walked outside. I opened our trunk and pulled out a small case. I had never shown this family. I carried it back inside and set it on the table, directly in front of Greg. And the whole room watched as I unlatched it and opened the lid. A silver star sat in the center, next to a bronze star, a purple heart, and a combat medical badge. Nobody moved. I rolled up my sleeve and showed the jagged scar across my shoulder. Shrapnel. Same night I earned the bronze star. I pointed at the silver star. This one was from a convoy ambush. I spent 6 hours dragging wounded soldiers to cover, while bullets tore up the ground around me. Real bullets, Greg. Not a story I tell at parties. I looked at him. You want to know why I don't talk about my service? Because when I talk about it, I have to remember the 19-year-old Marine who bled out in my arms while I worked on his chest wound. With one functioning arm, the room was dead silent. I remember his face. I remember the way he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. I remember his daughter's name, because I had to write his family and tell them he wasn't coming home. And I remember what I said to him. While he died, my voice cracked. But I kept going. I told him he was going to be fine. I held his hand, and I lied to him until he stopped breathing. And then I moved on to the next one, because there were more boys bleeding out in the dirt, and nobody else was coming to save them. I leaned in close enough to smell the beer on Greg's breath. So go ahead. Call me Stolen Valor one more time. His face had gone white. His mouth opened and closed. But nothing came out. The grandfather, a Vietnam vet who rarely spoke at these things, reached over and picked up my silver star. He turned it over, examined the back, and set it down gently. Then he looked at Greg. Go get your medals. Show everyone. Greg, stand. I left them at home. The grandfather slammed his palm on the table. I know you got discharged 6 months in. Your CEO called me 15 years ago. I kept it quiet to protect your mother. But I'm done watching you call a real soldier a liar. Greg looked around at his family, and every face stared back like a stranger. The silence that followed the grandfather's revelation was heavier than the body armor I used to wear. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Greg was frozen. For years, he had built a fortress out of lies, brick by brick, story by story. Now, with one sentence from a man who hadn't spoken more than 10 words all night, the fortress had collapsed. 6 months. Greg's mother, Linda, finally whispered. Her voice trembled, her eyes darting between her father and her eldest son. No. That's. Greg told us he was medical discharge. He hurt his back pulling a man out of a burning Humvee. He has the back brace. He bought the brace at CVS, the grandfather, Arthur said. His voice was like grinding stones. He didn't look at his daughter. He kept his eyes locked on Greg. He didn't pull anyone out of a Humvee. He never left Fort Benning. He washed out of basic training. Failure to adapt. Insubordination. And Arthur paused, his eyes narrowing. Theft from the barracks. Greg stood up so abruptly his chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor. You're senile, old man. You don't know what you're talking about. That record is sealed. Sealed. Arthur let out a dry, mirthless chuckle. I'm a retired colonel, you moron. And I knew your CO. I called him the day you came home crying. My husband, Mark, looked at his brother like he was seeing a stranger. Greg, I paid for your PTSD therapy sessions for 2 years. I gave you $6,000. Greg's face turned a mottled shade of red and purple. The swagger was gone, replaced by the cornered ferocity of a rat. I needed the money. I couldn't get a job. And you, he pointed a shaking finger at me. You come in here with your little props and try to ruin my life? You think you're better than me? Yes, I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of reliving the memories I had just weaponized. In this specific regard, Greg, I am better than you. Because I earned the nightmares. You just rented them. I closed the lid of the metal case. The snap of the latch echoed like a gunshot. Mark, we're leaving. Mark, you can't leave. Linda shrieked, finally finding her voice. We need to talk about this. We are a family. Mark stood up, his hand finding the small of my back. No, Mom. You let him treat my wife like garbage for 5 years. You let him mock her. And you laughed. You're not a family right now. You're an audience for his show. And the show's cancelled. We walked out. We didn't look back. But as the heavy oak door clicked shut, I heard the sound of Greg screaming, a glass shattering, and the low, booming voice of the grandfather telling him to sit down and shut up. The drive home was silent for the first 20 minutes. I watched the streetlights blur past, the orange glow reminding me of tracer fire in the distance. I focused on my breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Mark pulled the car over onto the shoulder of the highway. He put it in park, turned off the engine, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Then he broke down. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a deep, heaving sob that shook his shoulders. I unbuckled my seatbelt and reached for him, pulling his head onto my shoulder. I didn't know, he choked out. The Silver Star? Sarah, I knew you saw combat, but a Silver Star? Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to be that person, I whispered, stroking his hair. I wanted to be Sarah. Your wife. The accountant. I didn't want to be Doc anymore. I didn't want you to look at me and see the blood. I see a hero, he said, lifting his head. His eyes were wet, filled with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. But I also feel like an idiot. I let him talk down to you. God, the things he said. Tylenol and hangnails. And I just let it happen because I thought he was the real deal, and you were just support. It's how he designed it, Mark. He used your respect for the military against you. He stole from me, Mark said, his voice hardening. Not just the money. He stole the truth. All those times he cried on my shoulder about his dead squad mates, they never existed. Narcissists don't care about the truth, I said. They care about the spotlight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then Mark's buzzed. Then mine again. I looked at the screen. A barrage of texts from Linda. Please pick up. He's threatening to hurt himself. You need to apologize to him. He's in a dark place. How could you humiliate him like that? I turned my phone off. Block them, Mark. Just for tonight. We need peace. We went home, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the metal case on the coffee table. I opened it again. The Silver Star glinted under the lamp light. I hadn't lied to Greg. I really did see the face of that 19-year-old Marine every time I looked at it. His name was Miller. Private First Class Miller. He had blue eyes and a tattoo of a generic eagle on his chest that he hadn't even finished paying for. I'm sorry I used you as a weapon tonight, Miller, I whispered to the empty room. But I couldn't let him keep spitting on your grave. The next morning, the war had moved from the dining room table to social media. Greg hadn't hurt himself. Instead, he had stayed up all night crafting a narrative. When I logged into Facebook, my stomach dropped. He had posted a long, rambling status. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who betray you. Last night, my brother's wife attacked my service record. It's sad to see someone need attention so badly they'd forge documents and buy medals off eBay to discredit a real veteran. The VA messed up my paperwork years ago, and she weaponized a clerical error. Pray for me. The demons are loud today. Below it were dozens of comments from our town. Stay strong, brother. Ignore the haters, Greg. We know what you did for this country. She sounds toxic. Thank you for your service. Mark walked into the kitchen, saw my face, and took the phone. He read the post, his face darkening. He's doubling down, Mark said, incredulous. Grandpa exposed him in front of everyone, and he's doubling down. It's all he has, I said, drinking my coffee. My hands were steady today. The secret was out. I had nothing left to hide. If he admits he lied, he loses his identity. He loses the hero status at the bar. He loses the pity, the free drinks, the attention. I'm going to reply, Mark said, typing furiously. No, I stopped him. Don't engage. An internet fight just makes it look like a domestic dispute. We need to kill this with facts. Where is your grandfather? He stayed at a motel last night. He couldn't stand being in the house with Linda coddling Greg. Call him. Ask him if he still has the number for Greg's old CO. Mark smiled, a vicious, sharp smile I hadn't seen before. I love it when you go into tactical mode. 2 days later, the atmosphere in town had shifted. When I went to the grocery store, I caught people staring. The cashier, a woman who had known Greg since high school, didn't make eye contact with me. Greg had been busy. He'd spun a tale of a jealous sister-in-law trying to steal his glory. But we were busy too. Arthur came over for dinner on Tuesday. The tension that usually surrounded the old man was gone, replaced by a grim solidarity. He placed a thick manila envelope on the table. I pulled some strings, Arthur grunted. Didn't need the CO. I went through the National Archives and requested his DD-214. It's public record if you know how to ask. And I found his police record. Police record? Mark asked. Civilian, Arthur clarified. 2 years ago, he was arrested for fraud, trying to use a fake military ID to get a discount on a truck down in the next county. The charges were dropped because Mom paid the restitution. Mom knew. Mark whispered. The betrayal on his face was heartbreaking. She knew he was faking it. She knew he was in trouble, Arthur said. She didn't want to believe the why. She prefers the fantasy that her son is a tortured hero rather than a petty thief. What do we do with this? I asked, tapping the DD-214. It clearly stated, entry-level separation. Discharge, uncharacterized. No medals. No combat. Greg is holding a fundraiser at the VFW on Friday, Arthur said. Supposedly for his medical bills related to his service injuries. He's going to scam people out of thousands. I stood up. Not in my town. And not wearing my uniform. The VFW hall was packed. Smoke hung heavy in the air, mixing with the smell of stale beer and popcorn. Greg was on the small stage, holding a microphone. He was wearing a fatigue jacket that was 2 sizes too big, with patches that were placed incorrectly. A generic U.S. Army tape was sewn crookedly above the pocket. He looked pathetic to me now, but the crowd was eating it up. The government turns its back on us, Greg was saying, wiping a fake tear. They deny my claims. They say the records were lost in a fire. But I know what I did. My brothers know. Mark, Arthur, and I walked in the back door. The commander of the post, a man named Henderson who had actually served in Desert Storm, saw Arthur and nodded. They had spoken earlier. Henderson walked up to the stage and took the microphone from Greg's hand. Hey, Greg protested. I'm not done. Yeah, you are, son, Henderson said into the mic. The feedback squealed, silencing the room. Folks, I hate to interrupt a fundraiser. We love supporting our vets. But the VFW has a strict policy about verification. Greg's eyes darted to the back of the room. He saw me. He saw the folder in my hand. Panic, pure and primal, seized him. This is harassment. Greg shouted, trying to grab the mic back. That woman is crazy. Henderson pushed Greg back with one hand. I have here a fax from the National Personnel Records Center, sent over by Colonel Arthur Miller, retired. Henderson gestured to Arthur. The room turned to look at the old man, standing tall, his Vietnam veteran cap on his head. Henderson began to read. Gregory Thomas. Service dates, January 12, 2008 to June 15, 2008. Rank at discharge, Private E1. Awards, National Defense Service Medal. Notes, separated for failure to meet performance standards. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It says here, Henderson continued, his voice dripping with disgust, that you never deployed. You never left Georgia. And there is no record of any injury. It's a conspiracy. Greg screamed, his voice cracking. They altered the files. I stepped forward. I wasn't shouting. I didn't need to. I walked right up to the stage. I looked at the men and women in the front row, real vets, wearing their hats, their pins. My name is Sarah, I said, projecting my voice like I was back on the parade deck. I was a hospital corpsman attached to the 2nd Marine Division. I served 2 tours in Helmand Province. I pulled my silver star out of my pocket. I didn't hold it up like a trophy. I placed it on the table next to Greg's donation jar. This isn't a prop, I said. And neither is the money these people are giving you. You are stealing from them. You are stealing from every person in this room who actually signed the blank check to Uncle Sam. I looked at Greg. Go home, Greg, before the police get here. Because fraud is a crime. Greg looked at the crowd. The sympathy was gone. In its place was a wall of anger. Fists were clenching. Chairs were scraping back. Greg didn't say a word. He jumped off the side of the stage and ran out the fire exit. The fallout was nuclear. Linda called Mark screaming that we had murdered Greg. She claimed he was missing, that he was suicidal, that it was all our fault. Mark finally found his spine. Mom, stop. He's at a motel off I-95. I tracked his phone. He's not suicidal. He ordered 3 pizzas and a pay-per-view movie. He's hiding because he's a con artist. How can you speak about your brother that way? She wailed. Because he made my wife's life hell for 5 years, Mark said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. And you helped him. You knew, Mom. Deep down you knew. You just liked being the gold star mom, without actually having to lose a son. You liked the attention too. The line went dead. For months, we didn't speak to them. Greg left town. We heard rumors he moved to Florida, trying to start fresh, probably spinning a new web of lies about how his family betrayed him. The silence from his parents was the hardest part for Mark. He missed his dad. But his dad was weak, dominated by Linda's need for drama. However, something beautiful happened in the void left by Mark's family. Arthur adopted us. He started coming over every Sunday for dinner. He and I would sit on the porch, drinking iced tea. We didn't swap war stories in the Hollywood sense. We talked about the quiet things. The smell of burning diesel. The boredom. The difficulty of sleeping in a bed that was too soft. I never knew, Arthur told me one evening, looking at the sunset. I thought Greg was just embellishing. I didn't know he was attacking you. It's okay, Arthur. No, he said firmly. It's not. You carried a heavy load, document. You shouldn't have had to carry his lies too. A year passed. Life had settled into a rhythm. I was working as a trauma nurse at the local hospital. A job that utilized my skills but kept me close to home. Then the anniversary came. August 14th. The day Miller died. Usually, I took the day off. I would sit in the dark and drink too much. But this year I felt different. The exposure of my secret had lanced the boil. The infection was draining. I decided to visit the local cemetery. Not because Miller was there. He was buried in Ohio. But because I needed a place to think. I was standing by the Veterans Memorial when I heard a car door slam. I turned around. It was a beat-up sedan. Greg got out. He looked terrible. He had gained weight, his face was puffy, and his clothes were stained. He saw me and froze. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I stood my ground. He walked over, his hands in his pockets. He stopped 10 feet away. You happy? He asked. His voice was raspy. No, Greg. I'm not happy. Are you? I lost everything, he spat. My job, my friends. Mom and Dad won't even send me money anymore because Grandpa threatened to write them out of the will. You lost the things you stole. I corrected him. You can build something real, you know. You're young enough. Go back to school. Get a real job. Stop pretending to be something you're not. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I can't. It's who I am now. I'm the guy. I tried to get a job at a warehouse. Someone recognized me from the VFW video. It's on YouTube. Stolen Valor post exposed. 50,000 views. Actions have consequences, I said simply. He looked at the memorial. I just wanted people to look at me the way they looked at Grandpa. The way Mark looks at you. Respect isn't given, Greg. It's earned. And usually, it's earned through suffering. You wanted the respect without the blood. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. I saw a scared, insecure child who felt invisible. I hated you, he whispered. Because I knew. The moment I met you, I looked in your eyes and I knew you had seen the elephant. And I knew you knew I was a fraud. Every time you smiled and nodded, I felt like you were laughing at me. I wasn't laughing, I said softly. I was pitying you. Because you have to live with the lie. I just have to live with the ghosts. And I prefer the ghosts. He kicked the dirt. I'm leaving. Moving out west. Just tell Mom I'm alive. Tell her yourself, Greg. He got back in his car and drove away. I never saw him again. 3 years later, Mark and I were hosting Thanksgiving. The house was full of laughter. We had a 2-year-old daughter named Maya. The doorbell rang. Mark opened it. It was his father, Robert. And behind him, looking hesitant and small, was Linda. They hadn't been to our house since the incident. Linda held a Tupperware container of stuffing. Her hands were shaking. Can we come in? Robert asked. Mark looked at me. I was holding Maya on my hip. I looked at Linda. She looked aged. The fire was gone. Without Greg to champion, she had been forced to face the reality of her family. Come in, I said. Dinner was awkward at first, but the presence of a toddler is a great equalizer. By the time dessert came around, the tension had thawed. After dinner, Linda found me in the kitchen. I was washing dishes. Sarah, she said. I turned off the water. Linda. She struggled with the words. I found Greg's letters. From boot camp. I dried my hands. I kept them in a box in the attic, she continued, tears forming in her eyes. I reread them last week. He sounded so scared. He wanted to come home so bad. He begged us to get him out. And when he came back, I was just so relieved he was safe. I let him tell the stories because it made him feel strong. And it made me feel like I hadn't raised a quitter. She looked at me, really looked at me. I am sorry. I dishonored you to protect him. And that was wrong. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't fix the years of snide comments. But it was the truth. Thank you, I said. She pointed to the living room, where Arthur was showing Maya his old dog tags. Dad told me about the Silver Star. About the convoy. I nodded. You saved people, she said. I tried. You saved this family too, she said unexpectedly. If you hadn't stopped him, he would have gone to jail eventually. Or worse. And we would have kept living in a fantasy world. She reached out and squeezed my hand. It was the first time she had ever touched me with affection. Epilogue, the real definition. That night, after everyone had left, I went into the study. On the shelf, high up where Maya couldn't reach, was the case. I took it down. I dusted off the lid. Mark walked in carrying 2 glasses of wine. He sat on the desk and watched me. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Grandpa told me a story today, Mark said. He said that the bravest thing he ever saw wasn't in Vietnam. It was you standing in front of that room at the VFW, holding that medal, shaking like a leaf but refusing to back down. I smiled. I was terrified. That's what bravery is, Mark said. Being terrified and doing it anyway. I opened the box. The Silver Star shone back at me. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't just see Miller's dying face. I saw Mark standing up for me. I saw Arthur finding a daughter in me. I saw Greg driving away, finally forced to find his own truth. I saw my own reflection, not as a victim of trauma, but as a survivor who refused to let the truth be buried. I think, I said looking at Mark. I think I'm ready to tell you about Miller. About what really happened that day. Mark put down his wine. He sat in the chair opposite me, leaning forward, his eyes full of love and patience. I'm listening, he said. And for the first time, I told the whole story. I didn't leave out the blood. I didn't leave out the fear. I didn't leave out the guilt. I spoke until my throat was dry and my tears were gone. And when I was done, the war didn't end. The memories didn't vanish. But the weight was a little lighter. Because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. The end.